It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Good morning. Hey, it's Colonel Kolak. How we doing? Well, wiring's all finished. I had a gas tank out of the two that in here that I was not able to use. It was compromised, and didn't realize how badly it was compromised until I rinsed it out yesterday. I actually had a really badly rusted hole, and back in the day somebody dropped this thing in this corner and just bent the heck out of it, so I had some seepage. So after taking it out, and of course take your cover off, you can see my original paint back there. It's in actually very good shape, and the wood that supports the marine plywood that supports the tank. I had to pull off my ammo rack, and I will have to pull my radio table and my chest. My track is the Signal Corps radio system 528. See right there, they even put it on the track back in the day when they transferred it to the French. So I pulled my all my goodies out, and actually I need to clean up the hole on that chest that's badly damaged. That's supposed to be a hole for the antenna to come through, and somebody's just, I don't know what they did. They used a can opener on it or what. So anyway, that being said, I'm working on fuel tanks today. My cover's in actually pretty good shape. A little dinged up on the side there. I'll go ahead and straighten that out with my hammer. And I have to mount my seats back up underneath my folding seats here. Other than that, the tank seems to be in pretty good shape. This is covered with a natural rubber. It's kind of like the tanks that were put in fighters. The rubber gets wet with gasoline, and it swells around the hole to staunch the flow of fuel or slow down, etc., etc. What I'm going to do right now is I use some uric acid. People use all kinds of stuff to remove the rust and all the crap inside. I like muriatic acid. I use a mixture of 1 to 3 gallons of water, and I currently have 4 gallons sitting in here right now, working on side. I'll be turning it side to side. I did plug up my intake line. This damaged corner here, what I'll probably do is I'll get maybe some roofing material or something that'll set up and fill this back in, and then good old plaster of Paris and cloth, which is what they actually got on here. This is go ahead and I'll rewrap this and then put some plaster of Paris back on there just to seal it up, and then a touch of paint. I'm going to take my other tank out. I've never had any issues with it, but I still want to seal it. So once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and seal it. My plan for fixing the hole. The metal should clean up pretty nicely. I'm going to go ahead and put a fiberglass patch on the inside. I picked up some fiberglass and some mat and some material. It's just a small hole, so I'm going to go ahead and fiberglass it from the inside, and then I'll coat it 2 or 3 times. The red coat, from what I understand, won't hurt damage the fiberglass, and of course that will be coated. I'll probably put 3 or 4 coats in here. I'll use a gallon. It's reusable, and then I can transfer it and use it to the other tank. A gallon's a lot, yeah, but I don't have to use the full gallon, but I'll get a gallon. Let's put it that way, or I'll get 4 quarts or something to that effect. So once that patch is in there, a little bit of any issues with the seam here. And there looks like it's been issues over the year. That should seal from the inside. Of course, the acid wash will help clean all that up. And then baking soda. I'm basically going to use 4 pounds of baking soda to probably 5 gallons of water. I'll mix that up real good because I want to neutralize that. I'm not too worried about residual because I'll rinse the heck out of it. Then I'll use methyl ethyl ketone, MEK, which you can get at Home Depot. The reason I use MEK is MEK absorbs water, so any moisture left in there, when I let the thing dry out, I'll put the fans on it, But I'll still want to flush everything to make sure every seam, if there's any moisture in any seam, the methyl ethyl ketone will absorb the moisture, and again, that'll evaporate with some help, and then I'll be able to go ahead and coat it. So my goal today is to get the tank rust-free inside, and then I'll go ahead and put a patch in, let that set up. Fiberglass sets within a few hours. I'll let it definitely set up overnight. So I'll go ahead and I'll rinse this thing out. I'll neutralize it with the baking soda, rinse it out good, dry it, and then I'll go ahead and put a patch in it. So today I just want to get the acid working all the way around in there. Sanding unit works. Rough shape because the float was completely dissolved. So I went ahead and ran a resistance on my ohm meter here. On my meter here, and my resistance works just fine in here. Everything moves nicely, the mechanism. You'll see I've got a little bit of brass on here. This had a brass float that was just basically soldered on. So I ordered a new brass float. Went and looked at it, and these were on sale. Somebody had 2 of them that come in the box for $190. I don't think so. As long as I've got resistance here. So I ordered a float. I know what the float looks like because from my float from the other tank, I left that on there, and what I'll do is I'm just going to solder my new float onto here, right on the end. It sits on the end, and I will be good to go. So that'll be here in 2 or 3 days. I can still do the rest of the tank and put it all in place because that comes in at the top. Alright, so here's where we're at. We got our tank all flushed out. You saw the goodies we were using with the watered down muriatic acid. Did several rinses. Then I did a neutralizing rinse, and then several rinses after that. I used baking soda to neutralize everything. Then we did our MEK rinse, which absorbs any water that's left after I left. I had the tank fan running all night to dry the tank out. I still went ahead and rinsed it completely with the methyl ethyl ketone. And I went ahead and patched the interior here, the inside, with a fiberglass panel, which I'll tell you is just, if you look at my arms, man, just trying to get past that baffle. Holy cow. That is torn up, but it's done. After that cured, I went ahead and we ran resin on the outside, and I'm putting some material here in the corner where my rubber is. I had to cut my rubber out. I'll go ahead and take some resin tomorrow and clean this up and then smooth it out. I've got some plaster of Paris wrap coming, and I actually have this color paint. I have some of this original paint color. So after I wrap this corner, wrap some of these areas up here, I'm going to go ahead and touch it up with paint. I'm also going to hit the bottom here. I'll probably hit the whole tank actually, just to protect it. So that's where we're at. Tomorrow's plan, well, I'm going to go ahead and start coating the tank in the interior. Everything is dried out right now. Actually, it was pretty cool today. It was kind of cool here. I don't mean like cool baby. I'm talking about cool. So I went ahead and ran my blower along with my fan just to get some nice hot air circulating inside the tank. Actually, it's not looking bad. Of course, the biggest test is whether it'll hold fuel, which I'm pretty convinced it'll hold fuel just fine. My intent is to put 3 coatings inside, maybe just 2. So I want to go ahead and vacuum this tomorrow. Then if there's any loose material, I'll get my flexible hoses in and just vacuum up anything that may be loose. Real small loose stuff, that's going to go right into the coating, be embedded in the coating. It's nothing I have to worry about. I have the original half-track fuel filter underneath, and of course I've got one up here on top. So The one underneath is a copper, brass. I'm sorry, it's got the brass scales in it. So anyway, that's where we're at right now. The only other thing I'm waiting on is I have a float I ordered because I am repairing my fuel gauge pickup. Ran a resistance test, and although the float was pretty much just destroyed, eaten up in there, I went ahead and saved just a little bit there to solder to the new brass float. Well, I got my blower shut off, but I let that stuff dry on its own now. I've got that tank heated up. You know, I mentioned that I was checking my fuel gauge, and what I thought I'd do is I want to show you how I check for resistance, to show you that basically this thing, resistance increases or decreases depending on which end it's on. I think it's empty, it's probably high. When it's full, it's low. But I want to show you how I measured that with this particular. I use my ohm meter. Got it set on my ohm side. Make sure you've got your wires plugged in correctly. Your common and your, and of course your pickup wire. Now this particular setup here is you've got a stud here, and this actually is a stud that runs all the way through to your wire. So what I'm able to do is I'm going to be able to pick up my 12 volts here, and I could probably pick it up off here, but it's just easier for me to do it here. Of course, when I'm demonstrating it, it's a whole different animal. And I'll move my camera a second. And I've got my end here. If you'll follow the meter there, while I move this thing, I gotta hold one. What a pain. You know, I should have my alligator clips, but I gotta take these things apart to put them on. It's a great tool, but it's not always. So right now I'm showing a resistance. Let's look at a resistance all the way down. Oops. This would be in the empty. So I'm showing a pretty high resistance right there. $390, almost 400. But as you come up to the full mark, you'll see how the resistance drops. Look at that. So as they're filling the tank up, your resistance drops. My gosh, we dropped from 400 to... Alright, I got you. I'm touching them together. There we are. We're going to be at about... Doesn't like the fact that I'm so... Alright, you little bugger. Anyway, we dropped to about 12. So from 400, close to it, to 12. So that's how you know that this thing is actually functioning. The sender in here, the sending unit, as this raises and lowers, it's got a brass wheel here. You'll see how it turns the brass wheel. That actually turns a resistor mechanism inside, so it's sliding on a resistor in there. Probably a ceramic resistor with wire wrapped around it, so as it moves up and down, as it slides up and down, it gives you your resistance. So it tells your meter whether you're on your gauge on the dashboard, whether you're high or low. But I just wanted to share that with you. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to show it. Thanks. Alright. Had the fan running on this thing all night just to make sure all my fiberglass patches had held up. Went ahead and took the aim scope and ran it into the area here where I had patched my hole inside and out. This was just some a very deep gouge in the rubber. I just put some filler in there, kind of seal that up. I was unable to get my red coat, so I'm using PQR. Amazon didn't carry a red coat, and man, I'll tell you, I prefer to use my Amazon account. And that's what I landed up getting, 4 quarts of PQR. I've never tried this before, but POR, I'm sorry, PQR, I keep saying POR. Folks have had really good luck with this. I know a lot of people use it on their frames. Not the gas tank sealer, but they have a POR sealer that actually bonds to rust, prevents rusting. I do have a little bit of flash rusting in here, of course. I expected that. Not the end of the world. All the water I've run through here and stuff, I'm not surprised. So of course, a product that actually works with the flash rust and stuff will be fine. I went ahead and knocked the heck out of the tank, shook it and make sure anything loose was down, and I went ahead and vacuumed it out. Used my long arm to get through my hole here. Was able to get all this compartment, and I used the hose to get the back compartment. And yeah, there was some stuff, I could hear it coming up, but I run my hands in there and she's as clean as a whistle. So I'm going to go ahead and run with 2 quarts of POR and coat this thing. I do have my intake tube sealed. I don't want any POR in the intake tube because it'll seal up in there, and then man, that'd be a pain in the butt. So I have my cap, and I'll go ahead and just use a towel or a rag or something in here when I roll this thing around to get all the coating on. I want to get the top of the tank coated, of course, just in case I ever get any moisture in there from condensation. Well, we got our second coat of coating done in the tank yesterday. I also got my float in, and as you can see here, a little bit of soldering, low heat solder I might add, because if you heat this thing up too much you might actually damage the seam, and then you'll get fuel leaking in there and it won't be any good. This thing is pretty well dried. I've had it I won't try to install it until tomorrow, the tank, but I'm going to go ahead and put the sending unit in. Let's take a quick look at the tank. Something else I wanted to update you on. Generator's all done and back in, and boy does it work nicely. And it was actually kind of fun to go through it. The way to bench test these generators is actually pretty simple. There's 2 ways of doing it. You can do it with a voltmeter. Or you can check it, and just like a generator is just a motor, and basically what you can do is I took my heavy-duty battery cables, I hooked my negative from my battery onto the case, and then I went ahead and took, because I couldn't get down inside here, I took a big heavy-duty screwdriver, plugged my positive cable in, and then touched the post, and it started spinning as a generator. I did polarize it, of course, before I did anything, just to make sure it was turning the correct way. You can actually do reverse polarization on generators if you're not careful. And then when I installed it, you touch your battery to your field. Correction, you touch your battery to your armature, as I was. You just take a wire. I took a wire from my battery post instead of opening up my regulator, which is sealed still. And I want to leave it sealed because I don't want to ruin the history of it. It's still got its lead seal on there. So I just touched my battery post. This is your armature, this is your field. You touch it, you'll hear a clunk. You'll actually hear a clunk in here as the field magnetizes the armature to the magnets inside. And then fired it up, and immediately the ammeter jumped up. I went ahead and hit the horn a little bit to drive the meter down. The battery's fully charged right now, but I just laid on the horn for a while. I watched that meter sit way down, and then it bounced way up to charge about halfway onto the amp meter. So I know all that's working, which is actually a great feeling. So this tank is, well, I'll install this tank tomorrow. I'm still going to let got the fan pulled off to the side here. Going to go ahead and let this run. Let me get a flashlight so we can take a look inside the tank. 2 coats, and it looks awesome. It's smooth, very smooth to the touch. The bottom's a little rough, and I don't care about that. It's just because there was already a pretty heavy coating on the bottom. My leak, nothing. That hole is sealed up tight as can be, and a seam that was had a little crack in it, that's sealed up very nicely too. Now what I did was, as you see some fiberglass there, I just wanted to see as a test bed. My fiberglass over my hole, I was actually able to smooth it out a little bit better than I did with this. But I just wanted to see how it was going to stick on there with the resin, and this was just my test piece. Also wanted to see how well, I just put this on here, I wanted to see how well this coating would stick to the fiberglass, and it stuck beautifully. So there's my pickup tube. I've got to vacuum this out because I went ahead and ran a tap into my plug there because there was some material in there. So I've got to take that out. You can see from the baffles here. And I am not sure why these baffles are so badly bent up. That's just amazing to me. Somebody tore that into that with something. The only thing that I can think of is this thing might have actually had a round through the tank. It's possible. Something struck that, and you can see there's an indentation. That's not bent out. I mean, it's equally bent out. It's very strange. And also, if you look at that baffle was torn. It's torn from the side, so I'm not sure what happened back in the day here. I do know that this tank was handled very roughly. It was removed and dropped, and you saw pictures of that. So, you know, whether this is battle damaged or not, I'm not sure. This thing was in 4 conflicts. But I find it very strange, and I can't tell if there was a patch put on the side because I've got my coating all over it, and I never looked. I never thought about that. But that is really bizarre that is bent down evenly like something struck it. I don't know what the heck would strike this thing. I mean, not for the tank cover here itself. So other than just putting this in, I consider this operation concluded. Now I am going to do my driver's side tank. Tomorrow I'll go ahead and transfer from my fuel from my driver's side tank and put it in here and give that the test. But I'm confident enough that I'm going to mount it first, and then I'll just siphon my fuel out of my tank into some of my 5-gallon jerry cans. And then we'll give that a try, and we'll let it sit in here and we'll see how it goes. But I'm extremely confident that we got this licked. Alright. Tank interior is completely done. Here's what I'm doing to fix my exterior. I had a big chunk of stuff missing here. I filled it in. Some rubber I was able to save, natural rubber I was able to save. And now I'm putting similar to what they had on here, some material. These appear to be sheets. Actually, they look like they're a sheet. There was a natural rubber that was put on here, some cases wrapped around, and then covered with a plaster. I'm not going to go ahead and cover the whole tank with plaster, but I did plaster up my ends here and spots that had some bare metal on the edges where it had worn through. Not the problem here, but where it was sticking out at the end. I picked up this craft wrap plaster bandage cloth, fast set. You just wet it, go ahead and put it on, and then smear your plaster around in the cloth for adhesion. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint my tank. Let's see, I use some. This is a Ordnance product, TM9. A lot of you have probably seen this out there. Paul Veens used to own the business. I believe he sold it to John Bizel now. But excellent product. Their primer is you put that stuff on and it's like a rock. It really adheres nicely. When your sandblaster cleans something up and you go ahead and use that, I prefer that. His primer to anything else I've used. Like my ring here, I got to definitely take this ring out before I put my turret back in and sandblast it. It was buried, so you can see where it rusted halfway in the sand, and it needs to be cleaned up and sandblasted and then painted. So that being said, I'm gonna let my plaster clear up. We got a lot of clouds here today, but I don't think it's gonna rain, and it's about 70 degrees, so as you can see, I'm I'll get my spray gun out, and I'm going to go ahead and let this dry for another hour, and then I'm going to go ahead and spray paint my tank. Alright, we're all painted. Actually came out pretty good, the corners and all. A little bit of an indentation here. I guess I could have probably put some more fill in there, but actually the tank kind of has that rough look anyway, so I don't think it's going to detract from original to any degree. So, I'm going to clean up my paint equipment, let this set up, and after I mow the lawn, which it definitely needs, go ahead and set this thing up into the track. Alright, tank's installed, cover's installed. I've got 2 bolts to put on tomorrow, and then I've got to hook my wire up and hook my gas line up. Jump seat's installed. This cushion needs an inch off from it, so I'll be cutting that down. So, other than that, we are complete. I'll be putting some fuel in here tomorrow. Actually, I've got to drain this tank and then go ahead and be putting fuel in there. So, we'll see how that sets. Alright, Colonel K out here. Bye-bye.